I think it's quite...
We're not going to argue with them.
No, I wouldn't argue with them either. Thank you for that introduction, it's quite helpful. And I think, following on from Rob's presentation, you're not going to get slides from me, but I think there's some things in Rob's presentation actually show in terms of how more joined up the state of Jersey is becoming, after you will all know in terms of decades where it hasn't been very joined up as an organisation. So I've got 4 responsibilities for my job, just to let you know. One, as Jim has eloquently set out, is in terms of to repair the relationship between the states and the voluntary and community sector in its broadest sense. One's to actually improve the relationship between the states and the parishes. One's to actually manage both the library service and the superintendent registrar service. And the last one, which is a bit more challenging, is how to actually deliver services more locally on the island. Let me just focus particularly in terms of the voluntary sector bit, because I think that's the most relevant. And it goes, there's a slide that Rob showed quite early on, just talking about in terms of the relationship with the charities and the parishes. When I started here at the start of October, I inherited something which was really, really useful. I inherited 2 things. One was a working group that came out of the meeting Jim talked about with Charlie Parker back in March or April, when 2 things happened. One, Charlie asked for volunteers from that group to actually help to set up a workshop session in the summer. So there was 9 or 10 people who put their hands up and got involved in a working group, and that working group has continued to meet. That session took place on the 26th of September, I think it was, in this place. And that was attended by about 80 individuals from across the sector, both users and participants from organisations as well as people from the States. And that, I think it's fair to say, came out with no surprises. I think everything that everyone identified as the weaknesses between the relationship between the States and the sector, no one could argue with. What it did do is gave some validity in terms of what was required. That working group has continued to meet since then. We met 5 times, we're meeting again next week. And what that's done is actually to identify, it's fine identifying what the issues are, what we're going to do to address those issues. So hopefully you'll have seen either the press release that Jim's going to share with you that's only just gone out, and a draft action plan that we've tried to get out as broadly as possible to the sector to talk about what are we going to do to actually address those issues. I'll just raise a couple of them, 3 of them. One of them is in terms of, what I picked up quite early on and didn't take a genius to work out. There's a lack of coordination. Lack of coordination within the sector, there's a lack of coordination within the state, and a lack of coordination between the states and the sector. We needed someone to actually start building those bridges and being a bit of the glue to actually pull all this together. And I've got that thankless task. So hopefully, what I would say is the sector, no one knows how big the sector is, because if you look in terms of the Charity Commission, we've got 565, 585 applications. I don't know how many are going to get registered. That's just charities. On top of that, you've got social enterprise, you've got not-for-profit organisations, you've got community associations, you've got sports clubs, the list goes on. So, it's anyone's guess about how big the sector is. And I think what I would say, and I'd echo what Helen said, is that the strength of the island is the quality and the breadth and the strength of that voluntary sector. It is incredible. It's someone who's worked in the UK all their career until they came here, is that it is so much better and stronger than anything you can see in the UK. That's the strength. The weakness is it's not very joined up, it doesn't work together very well, it's not very collaborative, there's a bit of duplication, inefficiencies. So what I'm starting to do in terms of getting people to talk to each other, to work together with each other and starting to addressing some of those issues so we can work together much better. It seems quite easy, but there's a, something I took for granted in terms of for the last couple of decades is partnership working. There doesn't seem to be as much partnership working on the island as what you would expect. And that's one thing we're starting to see that we need to introduce and need to strengthen and need to improve upon. So there's one of the things about the coordination is about my role. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's about making sure that the sector itself has an organisation act on its behalf that supports the sector, that provides training, advice, guidance, governance. There are organisations that provide some of those roles to some of the sector, but there isn't an organisation that covers the whole sector and provides what I would expect, what I've seen that happens in the big cities in the UK. What I did on Friday is use my contacts in Manchester, where I worked for 28 years, to actually take 5 members of the voluntary sector across to Manchester to see what Manchester does. Not to say that's what we want in Jersey, because that would fail miserably. It's to say what let's look at an example of what happens elsewhere, and let's look in terms of some of the things that actually might be useful in a Jersey context. What we also identified is in terms of where else is good practice, particularly in the UK, but looking further afield. So we'll start looking in terms of what would you expect good practice to be in terms of an organisation that acts on behalf of the whole sector, that it's a political champion for the sector, that's an advocate for the sector, that's an enabler for the sector. So I think there's now some work starting to happen in terms of what does good look like in a Jersey context, and what can we hopefully put in place that provides that support for the sector going forward. The last thing I'd pick up on is there's a number of things within the action plan that you'll be able to see for yourself, is about how do we ensure that the sector starts to work together better. So you've got a prime example here in terms of Disability Partnership, which has been going for some time, that brings together those organisations and individuals that have an interest, a passion, and involvement around disability. But that's not happening elsewhere. So if you look in terms of issues around whether it's mental health, whether it's about homelessness, whether it's about children's services, adult health, social care, cancer, that's not happening in the same way. So one thing we're looking to do is actually look at a clustering approach where we start bringing together, both in terms of from the voluntary sector, those organisations that have got a role to play, but equally making sure the right people from the state support it, engage with it. It's about sharing information, looking at good practice, identifying innovation that we should be bringing in, identifying where there's gaps in service, looking in terms of where there's duplication, and starting to make sure that partnership approach starts to get embedded in everything we do, which all will help and support what Rob was talking about before. So I won't say a lot more because he only gave me 5 minutes, but hopefully what you will see over coming months, and this is not down to me, this is down to me working with a wide range of people within the sector and within the states, is that a strengthening about the way we work, a better relationship between the two, being more open and honest and transparent with each other, which hasn't really happened before enough, but also just work, trusting one another. That whole element of trust and building relationships is what will make this work going forward. So those that have seen me before, hopefully this resonates with what we've talked about. Those that haven't met me before, hopefully you will see over a period of time that actually I do mean what I say in terms of taking this forward. Jim's been involved in the working group, and that working group will continue until the action plan that we've put in place has actually delivered what we've said it should deliver. And after that, we then need to look in terms of whether the infrastructure organisation that we think is required is going to be that conduit in terms of driving forward in terms of what's required in the sector. Is that okay?
Yeah, great.
Thank you.